The woman rejected the man's proposal because this man was the male lead in a romance novel world. After the male lead and female lead met, they would fall in love. That was the iron law of this world. But the woman was only an unnamed side character in this novel. Even if she stepped into the glass slippers folded from contract, she was still a side character. The woman's name was Ciela. She was an obscure daughter of the Lilloy Count house. Soon, her stepmother would force her to marry an old nobleman, Count Saderland, and become his third wife. And just then, a man came to her door. He said he wanted to get engaged to her. He was Ashit, the head of House Nocton, one of the Empire's 4 great ducal families. Duke Nocton needed a fiancée. The entire proposal was abrupt and had nothing to do with romance. But to Ciela, it was an experience very close to romantic, because he was the ideal husband everyone dreamed of. Even so, she refused. She used the excuse that she was not worthy of Ashit. He was very surprised by that answer. He had not expected Ciela to truly want to marry Count Saderland. Ciela did not want to explain too much to him. In any case, they would have nothing to do with each other from then on. She thought their meeting was like a midsummer night's dream, brief and unexpected. In the end, Ciela still boarded the carriage headed for Count Saderland's estate. She had still been sold off. Her stepmother wanted to marry Ciela to an old nobleman for 2 reasons. The first was to use the bride price in exchange for her daughter to fill the huge debt hole at home. The second was for her second son, Kyle. He showed an almost perverse obsession with Ciela, but her stepmother believed Ciela had seduced her son, so she wanted to get rid of this thorn in her side. Sitting in the carriage, Ciela felt as if she were in prison. But her stepmother had miscalculated one thing. The carriage suddenly jolted and stopped. It was Kyle. His possessiveness toward her had already become nearly insane. Kyle stopped the carriage. He wanted to cage Ciela so she could never escape again. Ciela broke down and shouted for Kyle to get out. Kyle's face was filled with anger. In his furious eyes, an extremely dangerous storm was brewing. The next moment, only a smear of blood was left inside the carriage. Ciela opened her eyes in terror and found herself lying on a soft bed. It was Duke Ashit who had saved her. He said he happened to see a villain attacking her, so he stepped in. He brought her to a private residence under his family's name. Ciela thanked him, but she knew Ashit was lying. The two of them had met long ago at a social gathering, so Ashit knew very well who that attacker was and what relationship that person had with her. Ashit looked up at her with a complicated expression and told her that his previous offer was still valid. He knew Ciela was looking for a way to escape her family. Ashit believed he could bring her out of her misery. Ciela asked whether he had truly been passing by coincidence when she was attacked. Ashit did not answer directly, but he clearly knew what Ciela was facing and could provide a way out of her current predicament. In other words, Ashit had sent someone to follow her. It was as if he had seen through everything long ago and secretly had her watched. That was why she survived. She did not know whether she should feel grateful or chilled to the bone. This was indeed a way to escape her family, even if she had to put on glass slippers that did not belong to her. It did not matter. She sat up and asked Ashit whether the contract he mentioned last time still existed. And so, she became Cinderella, who had climbed into House Nocton. She escaped her family and moved into the Nocton ducal residence. Everything seemed to be going smoothly, until that incident happened. In the 5th year of their engagement, a woman came to the door with a boy named Louis. He was the child Ashit had been searching for many years. Ashit was actually an illegitimate imperial prince who had been abandoned by the Empire long ago. The previous Duke Nocton pitted his background, so he secretly adopted Ashit. More than 10 years later, the Duke and Duchess welcomed their second child, Edwin. The happy life of the family of 4 did not last long. One day, the Duke and Duchess suddenly died in an accident. Even Edwin, who was only 2 years old, disappeared that same day. Having lost the parents who had been like his own, Ashit was heartbroken. To repay them for raising him, he decided to succeed as family head and shoulder the family's burden. That way, when he found Edwin, he could smoothly hand the title back to his younger brother. But according to imperial tradition, an unmarried adult man could not become family head. That was why he sought an engagement partner, Ciela. He chose Ciela because she had no reason to refuse his proposal and would live quietly without causing trouble. With this contract, he could inherit and protect House Nocton, while Ciela would receive fixed annual compensation. and also his protection. The starting point and termination condition of this contract was this. After finding Nocton's heir, Edwin Lewis Nocton, the contracting parties could decide through consultation not to renew the contract. And that day had finally come. The son of the Duke's family, who had disappeared 8 years ago, appeared, along with the fallen noblewoman who brought him here, Camilla Muir. She was also the female lead of this world. Camilla's appearance was the opening of the original story. Ciela leaned weakly against the table. Her contract with Ashit was renewed yearly. Now that Edwin had returned, Ashit had no need to renew it. She arranged for Camilla and Edwin to stay in the annex. The butler came to ask her how she could take in outsiders on her own while the Duke was absent. Ciela explained that she had already notified the Duke and that he would return as quickly as possible. Because of her childhood experiences, she was very afraid of being alone in the same room with adult men, so she quickly walked away. Since the female lead had appeared, her contract with the Duke would come to an end, and she would leave this residence as well. Ciela went to the room to find Camilla, returned the pendant to her, and told her it would be better to give it to the Duke herself. This was the white jade stone pendant that could prove the identity of Nocton's heir. House Nocton had passed down the power of purification for generations. They could resonate with white jade stones and purify white jade stones contaminated by magical energy. According to the original plot, Camilla personally gave the pendant to Ashit. Naturally, it had to be returned to its proper owner. That way, the two leads could meet according to the original story's path. Just then, Ciela heard the sound of a carriage downstairs. Ashit had returned. The timing was perfect. Ciela said goodbye to Camilla and gave her and the Duke some space. But why did Camilla look so panicked? Could it be that she had some reason not to want to see Ashit immediately? Ciela felt she was an outsider, and even if she asked, Camilla might not answer. So she told her that if she was truly reluctant, she could say so directly to the Duke. No one would force their benefactor. She was the female lead of this world and Ashit's future lover. No one would ignore or neglect her. Camilla was still stunned. She grabbed Ciela as Ciela was about to leave. This reminded Ciela of her past experiences. She uncontrollably shook off Camilla's hand. Camilla fell to the ground. Ciela came back to her senses and apologized, explaining that she had not done it on purpose. She was not used to suddenly being grabbed. At that moment, Ashit had already arrived at the door. He asked Ciela what exactly she was doing. Ciela had not wanted to cause unnecessary trouble, but Ashit had arrived at the worst possible moment. She explained that they had only been talking about some things, and that she was just about to return. Ashit breathed a sigh of relief, stepped forward, and told her he had been very shocked after receiving the news. The moment he came back, he looked for her, but no one knew where she was. Ciela was bewildered. Why look for her first? The letter clearly mentioned something more important. Why was he looking for her? At that moment, Camilla stepped forward timidly and asked if this was the Duke. Only then did Ashit notice her. He asked who she was. Ciela said that she was the person who had brought young Master Edwin back. She had already confirmed the white jade stone inside the pendant. Upon hearing the words white jade stone, Ashit finally showed some reaction. To confirm Edwin's identity, Ashit wanted to take him to the temple. But Edwin was very dependent on Camilla, so he took both of them to the temple. A few days later, the old butler came to tell Ciela that the Duke and the others would return together in the afternoon a few days later. By the Duke's order, before they returned, a room in the main building was to be prepared for Miss Camilla. Miss Camilla was an honored guest, and there was only one room worthy of her. That was the room Ciela was currently using. So the old butler told her to move out. In just a few short days, Ciela had already met the change she had expected. She asked the old butler if this was truly the Duke's order. The old butler said coldly that this was the room second only to the master bedroom in scale, so naturally it should be used by young Master Edwin. Miss Camilla and a puppet fiancé, like her, were worlds apart. The head butler's meaning was obvious. He wanted to cast aside Ciela. This passing guest would not stay long, and instead side with Camilla, who had found Edwin. Although she had lived in the residence for 5 years, to them, she was only a ghost with no presence. Camilla was different. She had found the missing young master. Ciela could not compare at all. She told the butler there was no need to use Miss Camilla as an excuse. If he wanted her to give the room to young Master Edwin, he should have said so from the start. Ciela agreed to vacate the room for young Master Edwin, then close the door. But Ashit, who was originally supposed to return that afternoon, did not return to the residence. It seemed that either this entire matter had been fabricated by the head butler, or that man had encountered another emergency and could not get away. But no matter which possibility it was, it had nothing to do with Ciela. As she thought about this alone, someone knocked and entered. It was Lanslow. He had been the previous Duke Nocton's financial officer, and he was also in charge of Ciela and Ashit's contract. He had also heard the news that young Master Edwin had returned alive. Ciela thought he had come to discuss renewing the contract with her. The Duke probably would not renew it. Lanslow said he had come especially to see Ciela today. He handed over a document. A hint of surprise flashed through Ciela's eyes as she blankly accepted it. It was her business plan. Lanslow had come to discuss cooperation with her. Ever since he began managing her assets, he had had this idea. All along, Ciela had wanted to help children who were helpless and alone. Before those children were crushed by violence, hunger, and pain and lost themselves, she wanted to use her wealth to do what little she could. That was how this business plan came to be. However, she had only written it down casually. After that, she never moved it forward. Lanslow discovered the plan that had nearly been thrown away by a maid, and he improved it. Ciela was very moved. This was the first time someone had trusted her purely, not because of Ashit and not because of the ducal family. Lanslow's proposal was too sudden, so she could not respond immediately. She needed time to consider it. Lanslow told Ciela she could come to him for anything. Ciela saw Lanslow to the door. He said that the 3 personal maids who had served Ciela before had offended her without showing any remorse, so he had taken it upon himself to dismiss them. They were the ones who had gossiped behind Ciela's back before. Was Lanslow standing up for her? With his position, dismissing a few rude maids was not unreasonable, but his words felt as if he were encouraging Ciela. At that moment, the Duke's carriage also returned. Ashit helped Camilla down from the carriage. When had the two of them become so close? Ashit looked in Ciela's direction. Just as he was about to greet her, Camilla grabbed his sleeve. Ciela thought this would make Ashit displeased, but he merely smiled and looked gently at Camilla. In just 1 week, their relationship had warmed up so quickly. Ashit was going to hold a welcome banquet for young Master Edwin. Originally, this should have been handled by Ciela, his fiancée, but she did not even know the banquet date. But that was fine. This way, she did not have to force herself to attend such a suffocating banquet. Just then, the butler appeared behind the door, startling Ciela. He had come to deliver a letter. However, when Ciela received it, she realized the wax seal on it had already been broken. The butler excused himself by saying that confirming all matters inside the residence was part of his duty. Ciela opened the envelope, and her expression instantly darkened. It was a letter from Kyle. Ashit had promised to keep her forever away from Kyle's threats and let her live freely. He had confined Kyle on an island under surveillance, forbidding him from taking even half a step off the island. Why was Kyle sending letters? Ciela read further, then suddenly ran out. She could not stay here anymore. She had to escape. Kyle had written that he would come find her in half a month. Ciela slowly opened her eyes. She saw Edwin beside her. She clearly remembered going to find Ashit after seeing Kyle's letter. Why was she now beside Edwin? Edwin told her she had fainted in the corridor outside, so he brought her into the room and called the attending physician to examine her. The attending physician said it was malnutrition and a concussion, and that she needed plenty of rest. Ciela gently thanked him. She tightly gripped the letter full of threats that brought her fear and dread, and decided to ask Ashit for a clear explanation. She stood at the door and waited. She watched Ashit and Camilla walk toward the annex, laughing together. The two of them had gone to a clothing store together today. Ciela had something to say to Ashit, so she stepped forward and stopped him. Ashit brushed her off, saying he was too tired today. They could talk another day. But when she thought of Kyle's terrifying letter, she did not want to wait even a moment. She looked at Ashit seriously and asked word by word what exactly was going on with Kyle's letter. But Ashit turned a deaf ear to her words. He only looked at Camilla not far away. Seeing Ashit's indifference, Ciela unconsciously raised her voice and questioned what exactly was going on. He did not understand at all how much despair this letter brought Ciela. According to imperial law, Kyle could not actually be punished for his violence, because matters between family members were managed by the family head. When her father was still alive, he had been completely bewitched by her stepmother, so he ignored Ciela's situation. After her father died, the acting family head was a confidant of her stepmother, so Kyle's crimes were simply ignored. It was Ashit who had seen her struggle. That was why she decided to offer him her trust and make one final gamble. The man who had once pulled her out of the mire now only said coldly, that he did not know either. Ciela felt as if she had been struck by lightning. That sudden sentence was like a heavy stone smashing into a calm surface of water. She clenched her fists, angrily threw the threatening letter at Ashit, and demanded that he find out exactly what was going on within a week. Then she turned and left. Camilla witnessed everything and asked Ashit what had happened between him and Ciela. He only picked up the letter from the floor, put it into his clothes, and told Camilla it was nothing. Ciela began waiting, because Ashit was the person she had resolved to make her final gamble on. She did not want to be completely disappointed in humanity. That was why she gave him one chance. But cruelly, Ashit forgot the letter he had placed in his pocket. Even after a week passed, he did not knock on her door. 9 days later, Ciela went to Ashit from far away. She could hear cheerful laughter coming from the room. Camilla was trying on new clothes for the banquet 4 days later. Ashit nodded in satisfaction. Ciela stepped forward to confirm the time of the banquet. Ashit frowned in confusion. He had clearly asked the head butler to inform her. Was she deliberately finding fault? But this was not the purpose of Ciela's visit. She asked coldly how the matter had been handled. Ashit stood up indifferently and told her he had already sent people to the island to check. There would be news before long, so they could talk then. Ciela was completely enraged. Ashit had never read that letter at all. The letter had even clearly written the date Kyle would come. He simply did not care. Ciela left only one sentence. I should never have trusted you. Then she turned and left. Her final gamble had been lost. She believed the person she had staked everything on had completely changed. Was the problem with her, or with those who betrayed trust? But this time, she would no longer sit still and wait for death. A few days later, Ciela did not attend the banquet. Ashit did not seem regretful about it either. He only sent the head butler to pass on a message that she could do as she liked. As Ciela let another meaningless day pass, she waited for a certain moment, because there was someone very important she needed to meet. That person was Renard, her stepmother's eldest son. He had helped Ciela cancel her marriage to Count Saterland and brought about her engagement to Ashit. In exchange, he became the head of House Loloya. As the saying goes, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. Ciela asked Renard how Kyle had left the island. He answered with a headache. Her stepmother and her confidant, Viscount Moke, had also gone all out. Starting 3 years ago, they had regularly sent people to the island every half month. Ciela was speechless. If what Ashit said earlier, that he did not know about this matter, was true, then it meant he had neglected the management of that island all these years. Renard had attended today's banquet. Others might not understand, but he could guess most of Ciela's situation over the years. Ciela already had a plan in mind. Early the next morning, she came before Ashit, who was dealing with work, and told him that tomorrow was the day Kyle said he would come find her. Ciela looked at his reaction. As expected, he did not know. She continued asking whether he knew Renard was among the guests. The guest list had been personally checked by Ashit. He knew that very well. Ciela no longer beat around the bush. She told Ashit directly that she planned to take this opportunity to leave here with Renard. Ciela's trust in Ashit had already fallen to zero because he had betrayed her trust. She now understood clearly that Ashit was the kind of person who spoke one way to humans and another to ghosts. But according to the contract, the parties could not claim compensation from the breaching party. They could only request termination of the contract at any time when the other party breached it. Every time Ciela renewed the contract each year, she received twice as much property as the previous year. By paying this money, Ashit gained freedom. Before finding Edwin, he no longer had to be pressured by his family to marry. Their relationship was only that. Ciela could no longer demand even the slightest human warmth from this relationship. She wished she could break the contract and leave right now. Ashit probably also needed some time to wrap things up. She was willing to wait. She handed the agreement to Ashit and asked to end their cooperation. Once Renard found a place to live, she would immediately move out. Ashit's expression grew darker and darker, and his voice carried a hint of reproach. Is this your way of throwing a tantrum and threatening people? Ciela did not understand how this had become her threatening him. Ashit irritably threw down his pen. He felt that Ciela had been going to extremes from the very beginning, and he did not understand what she wanted. He questioned Ciela, asking if she knew how much time he had wasted because of her. He planned to thoroughly strengthen security. If she was still uneasy, he could send guards. So he asked Ciela to calm down and wait until he found out the truth. Ciela realized she had miscalculated. It was like talking to a wall. Ashit had no intention of empathizing with her. What exactly was she afraid of? She had once thought that after escaping her family, she would have a happy life. In the end, it was only another cage. Although she knew that Ashit would soon meet his female lead, she had believed that at the very least, he was not someone who betrayed trust. So she had originally planned to leave once the contract ended and wish them both well. But reality was always far from ideal. No one had expected Kyle to return. For 5 years, Ciela had relied wholeheartedly on Ashit and entrusted all matters related to Kyle to him. Yet things had turned out like this. How shocked must she be? Now she probably could not trust anyone. The only one who could help her now was Renard. She used part of the mining rights to the White Jade Stone mine as the condition for exchange. This was a mine passed down through generations of House Nocton. Because white jade stone contained the power of purification, it was extraordinarily valuable. As long as one possessed a white jade stone mine, one could earn more than an ordinary territory's income for an entire year. Renard was a man who had betrayed his own younger brother and seized the position of family head. With profit before him, he would not care about blood or family affection. But precisely because of that, he seemed reliable. As long as she had money, she would not have to fear that he would not help. While the two of them were discussing things, there seemed to be someone nearby. It was the butler Dennis and Camilla. They looked a little too intimate. Camilla also noticed the two of them and quickly separated. She asked Ciela in a panic why she was here. What a reversal. Was there anything wrong with having lunch with her rarely seen elder brother? Dennis hurriedly bowed to her. But Camilla showed no fear at all. She stepped forward, grabbed Renard's arm, and apologized for disturbing them just now. In an instant, something became wrong with Renard. His gaze turned vacant, and he seemed completely lost, as if something had happened. He said his head hurt badly and that he wanted to rest for a while. They could talk about the rest later. Then he left, leaving only Ciela standing there. Ciela could only return to her room first. Just as she reached her door, she saw Edwin. He was waiting for her, but he had waited too long. Edwin's legs had gone numb, and he could not stand up. Ciela stepped forward to help him, only to see that Edwin's legs were covered in countless scars. Ciela asked him what had happened to those wounds. Edwin stammered that he had accidentally hurt himself while playing. She lowered herself and patiently told Edwin there was no need to lie. She would help him. Tears shone in Edwin's eyes, and he slowly told her the story of the man who had lived with him and Camilla. That man's name was Ted. He was probably Camilla's friend. Other than that, Edwin knew nothing about him. Before the female lead met the male lead, she had actually lived with another man. There was no such plot in the original story. Camilla had always deliberately hidden the fact that Edwin had been abused. That was why Ashit did not know. Even when Edwin bathed, Camilla did it herself. Ciela could not understand why Camilla did this. She should not ignore young Edwin's pain for the sake of achieving her goal. Ciela wanted to help Edwin, so she found Ashit and told him that Edwin had injuries on his body. He had old scars and newly healed wounds. Both legs were covered densely with scars. Ciela could not possibly fail to recognize what they were, because marks large and small like those on Edwin's body also lay quietly on her own. They were scars of grief. Ashit's face was filled with shock. His mouth opened, but he could not speak. Ciela told him that if he did not believe her, he could confirm it himself. Then he would know whether it was true or false. After that, she left without any lingering attachment. The day Kyle had threatened to come had already passed, but he did not appear. Because of this, Ciela became even more uneasy. No one knew when or by what method Kyle would come to her. She locked herself in her room. During that time, only Edwin often came to see her. The things they talked about were all insignificant daily matters. But for someone who had not had a proper conversation in years, this filled Ciela with energy. Edwin complained to her that the escort knights kept staring at him and would not let him be alone. It seemed Ashit had begun taking care of him. That was a good thing. Edwin also cared about whether Ciela's previous malnutrition and concussion had improved. Ashit, standing outside the door, happened to hear this. He barged in without hesitation and asked what that meant. Both of them were startled. Ciela sighed. It seemed she had to interrupt their conversation or Edwin would be frightened. She told Edwin to go back for today and come again at noon tomorrow. Edwin nodded and agreed. After he left, Ciela asked Ashit why he had come. There was news from the island. Kyle had probably escaped from the island 2 months ago. Ashit promised to capture and imprison him as soon as possible and watch him closely from then on. As for Edwin, he said he would care more about him from now on. Ciela listened quietly without saying a word. Ashit saw her dissatisfaction and told her to speak honestly. Ciela looked up weakly. What use was there in saying it? Had he never felt anything was wrong before? Changing rooms, not attending the banquet, dismissing the maids. Those were all things the old butler said, right? She questioned Ashit, asking if he had not found it strange. She had clearly never done those things, yet he had never asked what happened. Ashit should also understand, now, what his indifference and negligence had brought about. On a bright, sunny day, Renard came to see Ciela. He told her he did not know what had happened to him last time either. He only felt that he had to leave that place, and only then did his headache ease. This matter was indeed a little strange, but Ciela was exhausted in both body and mind and no longer wanted to investigate. She no longer wanted to go out of her way to understand others. She told Renard she wanted to leave here immediately. If they could not leave together, she did not mind going alone. Renard found several houses that were not too far away and let Ciela choose. In the end, she chose one near the port and planned to move there tomorrow night. Soon, she returned to her room and packed her luggage. All that remained was to make Ashit have no choice but to leave the residence tomorrow. As long as she found an excuse for Camilla to go out, Ashit would naturally follow her and leave. Just as Ciela opened the door, she saw many blue roses placed outside. This was Kyle's doing. He had appeared. Ciela's face instantly turned pale. No, she could not be caught by him. Edwin came to see her and had no place to step among all the blue roses. Ciela felt she was about to go mad, but Edwin was still here. She could not collapse now. She discussed changing places to talk. She and Edwin went to the reception room. Edwin looked at her with concern and told her that if she felt unwell, she had to say so. So being cared for was such a pleasant thing. Although unfamiliar, it made her heart feel much calmer. After dinner, Edwin had gone to her room, only to find there was a guest, so he left. He had also seen that person several times in the garden before. He had stood in front of the door. A terrifying atmosphere spread around Ciela. After thinking calmly, Kyle could not possibly have come here personally. This was the ducal residence. After all, outsiders could not enter and leave easily. But Kyle had displayed his presence. There was only one possibility if he wanted to do that. Someone in the Duke's household was working with him from the inside. Ciela stood by the window, thinking about everything, and saw a knocked-in carriage arriving outside. Renard and Camilla got down from the carriage. Why were the two of them together? Edwin also ran to the window and said excitedly that it was Sister Camilla. She had said she was going to look at the place she would live in later, but he had not expected her to return so soon. Earlier, she had told Edwin that she could not live here forever, so she had to go out and find a place where she could live. Fortunately, there was a count willing to help her. Ciela asked coldly if it was Count Laloya and whether the place was Erewhon. Edwin was surprised and asked how she knew everything. Ciela clenched her teeth. That was the refuge Renard had found for her. Early the next morning, Edwin came running to see Ciela again. He reported to her that Camilla had left early in the morning. Recently, she had been going out almost every day. Ciela could not understand what Camilla was planning. When Camilla first came to the residence, she had seemed to take good care of Edwin, but now she barely looked after him. On top of that, Camilla's recent movements overlapped heavily with her own. This made Ciela very concerned. She asked Edwin to help her deliver a letter. She wanted to contact Lanslow. After all, the mine and villa in her possession were being managed by him. Ciela prayed that he could come as soon as possible. Since she had come into this world, she had to do everything she could to survive. First, she had to leave this place and hire guards to protect her. She had already asked the coachman to prepare a carriage for transporting her luggage out. Once everything was ready, she could leave immediately. Ciela walked alone in the corridor. She saw Ashit and Camilla talking. Camilla was saying goodbye to him, saying she was going to leave this place and that she was not worthy of being here. But Ashit said with deep affection that he hoped Camilla would become the mistress of this house. Hearing this, Ciela's eyes became hollow and unfocused, as if she had lost all sense of the world. Ashit had clearly been so cold to her, treating her heart-wrenching cries as childish complaints. Then what was she exactly? If that was the case, why had he opposed terminating the contract? He had not even properly settled the relationship between the two of them, yet he ran off to propose to someone else. Did he want to take away that enormous fortune? Ciela wandered through the corridor as if she had lost control when someone suddenly grabbed her. It was Renard. They had clearly agreed that she would leave in his carriage. So why had she changed her mind? Ciela shook off his hand. She sneered and said she already knew. He had gone to Erewhon together with Camilla. Renard explained that he had indeed gone to Erewhon with that woman, but he had no memory at all of why he went, nor did he remember what he had done there. Ciela no longer cared. She cut off his explanation and turned away. Ciela left the Count's mansion in a carriage. After the carriage stopped, she got out and told the coachman she would return in a little while. Ciela entered the bank in the city center. As soon as she went in, a large, burly man asked what service she needed. Ciela only felt afraid. She still could not overcome her fear of facing adult men alone. Just then, a woman walked over. She was the chief employee, Janet. She told Ciela she could tell her whatever she needed. Ciela wanted to withdraw some money. Janet brought her to the counter to handle it and told her she only needed to come again 2 days later. She also gave Ciela something. She told her that if she needed help, she could go here. It was the address of a mercenary guild. Janet explained that this place was definitely capable and trustworthy. This bank cooperated with them. They had not only male mercenaries, but also many outstanding female mercenaries. The guild master, Taylor, was a woman with a strong sense of justice. Even if clients did not say anything clearly, she could keenly perceive their difficulties. Ciela was very grateful. This had helped her solve a major problem. After that, she followed the address to the guild and found the guild master, Taylor. Ciela told her everything about Kyle and said she needed reliable people to protect her safety. Taylor recommended 3 women to her. 2 of them were twins. They were all excellent swordswomen, and the contract term would last until the moment Ciela was certain she was no longer in danger. Ciela had not expected the outside world to be so wonderful. She chose the twins. The short-haired one was Nina, and the one with the high ponytail was Rena. Ciela arranged for Rena to stay at the hotel and guard the money and luggage. In 2 days, she would leave the ducal residence. To settle things completely, she needed to return to the Nocton ducal residence. At dusk, Ciela returned to the ducal residence, first with Nina. The butler Dennis quickly rushed over and loudly questioned why she had left without a word, causing him great trouble. Before he could get close to Ciela, Nina grabbed him. She slammed him hard onto the ground. After returning to the residence, Ciela had originally felt a little nervous, but thanks to Nina, her tension instantly disappeared. Dennis climbed up from the ground and questioned how Ciela could casually bring an outsider of unknown identity into the ducal residence. Was this not far too offensive to the Duke? At that moment, Duke Ashit walked toward them. Dennis immediately began tattling, accusing her of bringing an outsider into the residence. Ciela said unhappily that Nina was not an outsider, but her guard. Since the Duke did not care at all about her personal safety, she had hired a guard. Was there a problem? Ashit asked if she did not already have guards. He remembered clearly assigning people to her. Ciela interrupted him. If she had guards, could he explain why the only guard by her side right now was Nina? Ashit still wanted to say something, but Ciela no longer cared about anything. She only said she was too tired and they could talk another time, then turned and left. Ashit felt that something was wrong, but he could not say what. Ciela returned to her room. Nina was eating the dinner she had personally requested from the kitchen. At that moment, there was a knock at the door. It was Renard. Nina told her that if she did not want to see him, she could drive him away. Ciela refused and had Nina open the door, but she did not let Renard enter. He had come to apologize. He said he had not meant to betray or deceive her. Ciela had thought he would say something in the end, but it was only meaningless words. Seeing that Ciela was unmoved, Renard threatened her, telling her not to forget who the head of the family was. The Ciela of today was no longer the weak person who could only rely on others. She calmly said she understood and told Nina to see the guest out. Then she shut Renard outside the door. In the study, Ashit was handling official business, but his mind was filled with Ciela's cold words from earlier. The tone in which she had spoken sounded like that of someone exhausted, someone who no longer intended to argue about anything. But it should not be like this. The one who had always been busy was Ashit, while Ciela had spent her days doing nothing in her room. If she had only become sensitive and suspicious because of Kyle, he could understand that. He had even instructed the attending physician to pay extra attention to her health. Yet she seemed completely unable to see his efforts, and she did not understand him at all. From beginning to end, she acted as though she were the only one who had given anything and was now exhausted. Ashit felt things could not go on like this. He needed to clear up the misunderstandings between them one by one. First, he would investigate the matter of the guards. He called for the old head butler. The old butler bowed to Ashit and explained that he had just gone to see Renard off, so he had arrived late. Ashit remembered that Ciela had said she would leave the ducal residence with him. Had she already left? No. With her personality, she would not leave without saying a word. Ashit felt an unprecedented unease. Ciela's recent abnormal behavior, if she truly intended to leave. Ashit hurriedly rushed out. No, he could not let Ciela leave like this. Meanwhile, in another room, Nina suggested to Ciela that after leaving here, she might as well go to Genid. There was a port near Genid, and it was also close to the Principality of Benis. If anything happened, she could cross the sea directly and go abroad. When Nina had worked as a mercenary before, she had been to Benis. It was quite suitable for living, and she and her sister would do everything they could to protect her. Ciela thought this was a good idea. She decided to seriously consider it. She truly still could not fully trust anyone, but this was the first time someone else's promise made her feel at ease. Just then, someone knocked. Lancelot had arrived. He sat in front of Ciela. Seeing the unfamiliar face beside her, he realized that this time, she had truly made up her mind. Lancelot took out what he had brought and told Ciela that in Demon Bank in the Imperial capital, there was a vault rented under her name. Documents related to land, mines, and other properties were all stored inside. What Lancelot had brought this time was the key that could open the vault. If she personally managed her assets in the future, it would come in handy. Ciela tightly gripped the key that belonged to her. There was one last thing she was very worried about. There might be a spy inside the Nocton household. That person had been incited by Kyle and threatened her. But there might also be people inside the residence who were being instigated by others and wanted to harm young Master Edwin. Lancelot was a friend of the previous family head, Damien. Edwin was the only bloodline Damien had left in this world. The security at the ducal residence was truly too lax right now. Even if Ciela was leaving, she did not want Edwin to be in danger, so she hoped Lancelot could protect Edwin. But Lancelot told her this was not something she should worry about. A new future was ahead of her. Now, she should put everything else down and focus on stepping into her own future. She should not look back at those who had imprisoned her here for years. She should keep moving forward with no other thoughts. Even so, he promised Ciela that he would often come by to look after Edwin. Ciela was filled with gratitude toward him. And at that moment, another person came to Ciela's room, pushing the door open without saying a word. It was Ashit. He had not expected Lancelot to be there as well, and forbade him from sitting. He assumed Lancelot had come to renew the contract. Lancelot spoke coldly and told him he was here today for personal reasons. Ashit scoffed. If it was not about the contract, then he should leave at once. Only after Lancelot left did Ciela ask coldly what he wanted. Ashit asked whether she knew that Renard had left the residence that morning. A lonely chill showed in her eyes. Her voice was as cold as winter as she said she knew. So what of it? Was he afraid she would leave with him? Ashit stubbornly said that was not it, then changed the subject. They had not finished talking about last night. He wanted to continue. She had asked why the guards he assigned to her had disappeared. Before he could finish speaking, the old butler came in and interrupted him. Ashit frowned in displeasure. He had clearly warned them that no one was to disturb him. The old butler told him Camilla had fainted. Ashit immediately stood up and asked the butler what had happened. Ciela did not want to hear it. She rose in anger and left. Camilla seemed to have been ill to begin with, and from dawn onward, her fever would not go down. Ashit even stayed by her side all night. The entire residence was thrown into chaos caring for her, but none of that had anything to do with Ciela. The next day, she and Nina finished packing. There was a great deal to do today. They needed to set out before the rain grew heavier. When they arrived at the gates of the residence, they unexpectedly found Dennis standing there. To stop Ciela from going out, he had already ordered every coachman in the ducal residence not to prepare a carriage. But he had still underestimated Ciela. She and Nina chose to leave on foot. With Nina comforting and protecting her along the way, she did not feel bored. Soon, they met up with Rena on the main street. The three of them bought many things for their new life. Nina also chose a sword for Ciela to use in self-defense. Unfortunately, by the time they finished everything, the bank had already closed. They could only come again tomorrow. Ciela reminded Rena to guard the luggage carefully. Then she returned to the ducal residence with Nina. They only had to endure one final day. When they returned, however, The entire residence was in an uproar, and many knights were present. Nina nervously shielded Ciela behind her. It was Ashit. He had ordered the knights to search the residence for Ciela. Now that he saw she had returned, he told the knights to withdraw. He wanted to talk with Ciela, but when the two of them sat face to face, only silence remained in the room. Ashit could not understand why she had gone out without even saying a word. Ciela thought there was no need to report to him every time she went out. Besides, he had never cared about her whereabouts at all. She did not want to waste time. Ciela felt Ashit had been rather strange lately, but she did not want to ask, nor did she want to discuss it with him. She changed the subject and asked how Camilla was doing. Ashit could only follow her lead and said Camilla was much better. But today, the butler had found Edwin unconscious in the corridor as well. Fortunately, he had been discovered quickly, and the doctor came in time. Edwin had fainted in front of Ciela's bedroom door. Ciela smiled, but there was not the slightest warmth in her eyes. She said coldly, "Are you suspecting that I hurt him? No wonder you sent so many knights today. How foolish." Ashit did not understand what she meant. Ciela continued, saying that she had not told him about Edwin being abused in order to gain his trust or closeness. It meant that in the entire residence, no one cared about Edwin except her. She questioned Ashit, asking whether he knew there were spies in the residence. Ashit knew nothing about any of it. Ciela warned him that if he had time to suspect innocent people, he should first manage the people inside his own residence, so that he would not regret it after it was too late. Then she left with Nina. She went to Edwin's room, only to find Camilla there as well. Camilla looked deeply remorseful, shedding sorrowful tears. She had previously concealed Edwin's abuse, and there were many other suspicious points about her, but this time, she truly seemed worried about Edwin. At the very least, the tears she was shedding now were sincere. Ciela gently handed her a handkerchief and comforted her, saying Edwin would get better. She looked at Edwin lying on the bed and pondered seriously. If Camilla was not the culprit behind this matter, then the one who had harmed Edwin could only be the imperial family. The deaths of the previous Duke and Duchess Nocton were in fact deeply connected to the imperial family. Because the Emperor coveted House Nocton's white jade stone mine, murderous intent arose in his heart. The current emperor was obsessed with power, and the strongest force capable of protecting both the mind and body from dark sorcery was the purifying power possessed by white jade stone. The emperor coveted that power, but instead of choosing to win House Nocton over, he wanted to take all of House Nocton into his own hands. Ciela urged Camilla to protect Edwin no matter what, and to stay vigilant at all times, never trusting anyone easily. Camilla nodded and agreed. The next day, Ciela left behind a letter and planned to leave with Nina. Together, they walked toward the gates of the residence. Unexpectedly, the old butler stopped them. At the front gate, he said Ashit had ordered Ciela to wait in the office until he returned. Ciela did not want to listen to him and insisted on going out. But to her surprise, the old butler summoned many knights. He ordered them to forcibly take Ciela back. Nina was about to draw her sword and duel them, but Ciela stopped her. Nina was only one person. She could not possibly defeat so many knights. Ciela told Nina to go find Rina first, then wait for her together at the residence. Nina was uneasy about leaving Ciela here alone, but if this continued, blood would surely be spilled. Ciela did not want Nina to be hurt because of her. She comforted Nina by telling her she had a weapon on her. Nina hesitated for a while, then finally gritted her teeth and agreed. Ciela understood that if she did not go, even if it meant crossing a mountain of blades or a sea of flames, Nina would come looking for her. But she could not drag Nina into this as well. Surrounded by knights, she returned to the residence. Ciela was alone again. The old butler told her that due to the heavy rain, the Duke would only arrive at the residence around noon tomorrow. Again, Ashit was treating her like a fool again. Even at the very last moment, he was still humiliating her like this. Not only did he restrict her freedom, he kept delaying things over and over. The guards outside were strict, and she had no way to sneak out. Ciela made up her mind. Tomorrow, she would clearly state that she was ending her contractual relationship with him and leaving this place. She gripped the dagger in her hand. If Ashit still refused to let her go, then he could not blame her for using any means necessary. Just then, Camilla came to find her. She said Edwin had woken up and that he said there was something he had to tell Ciela. They went to Edwin's room together, but Edwin asked Camilla to step out for a moment. He needed to speak with Ciela alone. He told Ciela that he had seen that man's face. Yesterday, when Edwin had gone to find Ciela, someone was acting suspiciously outside her bedroom door. But this time there had been two people. After the two of them noticed Edwin, they turned around. One of the men was Dennis. Edwin had seen them peering around outside the room, so he secretly hid to one side and observed them. In the end, the other man discovered him and shoved him into the wall. They wanted Edwin to lose his memories, but he remembered everything clearly. Ciela felt only despair. Dennis was the chief steward's son. Could even the chief steward of the residence be someone else's pawn? And Dennis had used the fact that Edwin had fainted in front of Ciela's bedroom as an excuse to shift the blame onto her. But it was still strange. Why would Dennis lie? He should not have thought Edwin would never wake up. Edwin clenched the bedsheet. He seemed to know why. Because the people here would not believe Ciela's words. Everyone was like that. None of them would listen to anything she said. It was as if everyone's minds had broken. They were all ignoring her. Edwin had read the farewell letter Ciela left for him. Tears spilled from his eyes. Was this why Ciela was leaving? He liked Ciela very much. But precisely because of that, Edwin knew he should not ask her to stay. If she continued staying here, she would surely continue to suffer. He hoped Sister Ciela could go somewhere that would not hurt her. He only hoped Ciela could be happy. Ciela covered her face and wept. Edwin's words seemed to finally make her feel that she was allowed to live for herself. Over the next 2 days, Ashit did not come to find Ciela. She did not want to delay any longer and decided to go find him herself. As Ciela walked through the corridor, someone suddenly grabbed her from behind. It was Camilla. Ciela abruptly turned around and shook off her hand, telling her that whatever it was could wait until later. Camilla froze where she stood. Ciela had clearly told her not to touch her casually, but she had completely ignored the warning. Ciela had no intention of wasting any more time here, so there was no need to scold Camilla either. She went to Ashit's room, knocked on the door, strode up to him, and told him she was leaving the residence. Once the hired carriage arrived, she would leave. Ashit hurriedly stood up, but Ciela had already waited long enough, and she had already given him chance. At this point, she no longer wanted to argue right and wrong with Ashit. The moment he had said to Camilla, "I hope you can become the mistress of this house," Ciela's role in this household and her contract with him had both ended. She had come today to make one thing clear. Ashit was the one who breached the contract first, and now he should take responsibility for it. Also, he should stop letting the people in the residence block her whenever they pleased. Ashit was agitated and confused. He could not understand a single word Ciela was saying. Ciela asked him in return whether he truly had no idea that everyone in the entire residence treated her like a criminal. If he did not know, then he should remember it from now on. Ciela hoped he would not regret trampling on the trust the two of them had built over such a long time. If possible, she hoped Ashit would suffer the same pain she had suffered. She hoped the two of them would never meet again. Ashit hurriedly grabbed Ciela as she was about to leave. He had always believed that their cooperation had been pleasant. But what he did not know was that before this, Ciela had acted on her own, swallowing every grievance so as not to burden him. If she were to bring all those matters up now and demand an explanation from him, it would be unfair to him. That was why she only spoke this far. Even though there had been times when Ciela understood Ashit, she had truly spent all her efforts considering and accommodating him. Through constant compromise, she had given up one thing after another. In the end, she was left with nothing. If this continued, she would even lose herself. That was why she had to leave. Everything Ciela said caught Ashit completely off guard. But he had no time now, so he decided to speak with Ciela again that evening. Once again, he let go of Ciela's hand. What he did not know was that only by leaving this place could Ciela live properly. And on this day, the Cinderella of House knocked and disappeared. In the end, Ciela still boarded the carriage that would take her away. After truly leaving, everything felt so unreal to her. Looking at it now, that enormous residence was like a tiny toy castle. She had actually been trapped in such a small place, lacking the courage to leave. If she had known, she would have left earlier. At night, everything in the ducal residence looked the same as usual. Ashit was reading a letter from the second prince, Cassius. The second prince believed his mother's death was connected to Ciela. He wanted Ashit to use this opportunity to hand over Ciela and marry Camilla. Ashit only felt a headache coming on. He was unwilling to hand Ciela over, but the second prince would make a move sooner or later. If, as Ciela had said, there were spies in the residence, then they were most likely the second prince's people. Right, Ciela? Ashit seemed to suddenly remember something, and his vision seemed to clear. He had promised to go find Ciela that evening, yet he had forgotten. He no longer even remembered what date it was. He found the old butler and asked where Ciela was. But the next words made Ashit completely collapse. Ciela had left the residence not long ago, and she had never returned. Meanwhile, Ciela had almost finished tidying up the first floor of her new home. The place had been vacant for a long time, so cleaning it took a lot of time, but she still felt it was a good place. There was also a very spacious winery. In the future, it could be converted into an orphanage, giving homeless children a place to stay. At that moment, Nina came down from the second floor, carrying an old, broken cabinet. The cabinet was too old, so Ciela decided to throw it away. But she had not expected that carrying it such a long distance would exhaust her. It seemed her stamina was worrying too. Back when she chose the house, she had valued how spacious it was, but one person alone could not possibly manage it all. Although she was somewhat afraid of strangers, it would still be better to hire help. Besides, she had to slowly get used to all of this. After all, the reason she left the ducal residence was to welcome this kind of life, to live like a person, to live an ordinary life like everyone else. She had pushed open the doors of that enormous residence and escaped. She looked into the distance and remembered her promise with Edwin. No matter what, she had to live happily. Just then, an apple rolled to Ciela's feet. She picked it up. A black-haired man walked over from afar and reached out his hand to her. In a gentle voice, he asked, "Could you throw that apple to me?" His voice was extremely charming. His gray-blue eyes carried a faint smile, and he was a breathtakingly handsome man. In his hand, he also held a black cane to support his balance. Ciela was still not used to being alone with men, so she decided it would be best to quickly return the apple to him and leave. Unexpectedly, the apple in her hand rolled to the ground. The man was amused by Ciela. Like a gentleman, he said he should have climbed over the fence. In that case, he would give the apple to her as a meeting gift. Ciela could not yet tell whether the man before was a bad person or not. Filled with caution, she explained that she had just eaten lunch. Then she handed the apple back to the man. Still, she felt a bit puzzled. Outside the house Ciela had chosen was a forest. Only after walking down a long forest path could one see signs of human habitation. It was impossible for villagers to happen to pass by here. Moreover, the man had a cane, making it even harder for him to reach this place. Ciela gripped the weapon hidden in her clothes. If the man had another purpose, and if he was connected to Kyle, she would not obediently let herself be taken. Seeing Ciela deep in thought, the man smiled faintly. He asked whether she had visited the lake nearby. Ciela did not understand why he suddenly mentioned the lake. The man told her he had heard there were evil spirits in that lake, but he lived by the lake and had never seen any evil spirits. Thanks to that rumor, however, very few people went near the lake, so the place was clean and beautiful. The lake was very close to here. He invited Ciela to go see it. If she followed that path, she would arrive soon. Ciela understood that the man had noticed her caution. He was telling her, in a natural way, that he lived nearby, trying to dispel her doubts. The man had thought no one lived here. He had especially liked taking walks nearby before. Ciela knew very well that people with physical disabilities could easily have their hearts eroded as well. She also knew that for people with inconvenient legs and feet, there were very few places where they could walk around in peace. She did not want to deprive someone of a sanctuary in his heart. She told the man that he could walk freely outside the fence. The two of them could be considered neighbors. The man smiled faintly and introduced himself as Ada Victor. The two exchanged names. The two planned to part there. Just as Ada was about to turn around, Ciela realized that she had placed the cabinet over there. She shouted for him to be careful, but it was too late. Ada fell hard to the ground. He looked to be in great pain, but still said he was fine. Ciela and Nina escorted Ada back. In this situation, she could not possibly let Ada return alone. She felt very sorry. It was because of her that Ada had been hurt. Ada told her not to worry. He had clearly been in great pain just now, yet now he acted calm and composed. It seemed he was used to suppressing his emotions. At that moment, someone burst in and shouted, "Are you all right?" Seeing that someone was there to look after him, Ciela and Nina took their leave. After the two of them left, the newcomer knelt before the black-haired man. The black-haired man's true identity was actually the crown prince of the Imelos Empire, Otesta Victor Emmett. The person before him was his subordinate, Tristan, Otesta asked how the investigation was going. Tristan told him that everything matched. The time when the female sorcerer who cursed his leg disappeared perfectly coincided with the time when the second prince sent a woman to House Nocton. Cassius had successfully used that woman. The current Duke Nocton had been bewitched by her, which was why he drove Ciela out. Cassius's goal was to restrain Ashit first, then make a move against Ciela afterward. Otesta considered all this, but Ciela did not seem to remember him. The two of them had met once when they were young. Meanwhile, Lanslow came to find Ciela. Seeing how completely different Ciela had become after moving out, he thought her decision to come to Genid was excellent. This was a port city where tens of thousands of people came and went every day. No one cared who had just moved here. Even if someone suddenly disappeared, no one would ask about it. Lanslow had come today because he hoped Ciela would meet someone. It was an old acquaintance. Ciela was shocked. She had only come to know Lanslow through Ashit. She truly had not expected Lanslow to know an old acquaintance of hers. When the door opened, Ciela immediately understood that the person who had come was Helen. She was the daughter of Ciela's wet nurse, and also the only friend who had grown up with Ciela since childhood. But later, after her stepmother Bianca entered the family, she rooted out everyone in the household connected to Ciela's birth mother and drove them all out at once. Not only that, she also tried to kill the wet nurse and Helen. The two embraced each other excitedly. Ciela had not expected Helen to still be alive, and she was truly happy to see her again. Lanslow was Helen's older brother. His mother had remarried the late Baron de Fiel, who had once served as Princess Isolde's attendant. Princess Isolde had passed away 3 years ago. Although Helen did not know why Isolde had helped her, she knew clearly that it was Isolde who had protected her and her mother when Bianca persecuted them. To Ciela, Helen was the only family she had left in the world. Helen told her that her mother had also passed away, perhaps because of all the hardships and wandering over the years. Ciela was very sad. Helen's mother had protected her childhood from harm. Now, Ciela could only hope she was happy in heaven. Early the next morning, Helen brought water in at dawn and asked Ciela to wash up. Ciela stopped her. Helen had nearly lost her life because of her before. How could she still treat her the same as always? Angry at herself because of guilt and remorse, Ciela told Helen that she would do her own tasks and did not need Helen to be her maid. Helen told Ciela she only wanted to stay by her side. She was willing to be the friend who had known her the longest. Ciela was deeply moved. Helen clearly had a home she could return to and family who could accompany her. In that house, she would not face any threats and could live comfortably. Lanslow had even rented a house on Genid's Central Street to make it easier to confirm her safety and to handle matters related to running the orphanage. Ciela gripped Helen's hand. Both of them were very happy, but in places Ciela did not know, danger was quietly approaching. In the days that followed, Helen and Nina bickered noisily every day. Ciela had previously worried that they would not get along, but it seemed she had worried for nothing. However, Nina's overprotectiveness towards Ciela had continued for several days. Over these days, Nina had used the excuse that she had been paid to deprive Ciela of the right to do all sorts of small tasks. It was probably because Helen had told her about what Ciela had gone through before, but Nina did not show it outright. Ciela was grateful for that, so she tried her best to cooperate. She decided to go outside for a walk. Ciela did not want to make Nina worry more, so she had to live well. Ciela walked through the garden and, without realizing it, reached the fence. This time, she met Otesta again. The two greeted each other, and Ciela asked with concern how his leg injury was. Otesta smiled and answered that it was almost healed. Recently, he had been thinking about how to repay her. Ciela quickly said there was no need, since she had been the one who placed the cabinet there. She planned to leave and continue her walk, but Otesta stopped her. He had just seen that Ciela looked troubled. She had not even noticed him approaching. He asked whether she would be willing to share her worries. Ciela did not want to reveal her past to a stranger and then be mocked by him. Ashit, who had never been able to empathize with her fear at all, had already been enough. But Otesta said that precisely because they had only met by chance, and because this relationship was fleeting, they could open their hearts to each other. He frankly told Ciela that he wanted to bring the two of them closer. They were each other's only neighbors. If they had a good relationship, they could help each other in times of danger, and both of them would feel more at ease. Ciela thought his words made sense, so she told him everything that had happened to her. The two gradually talked until dusk. After listening, Otesta suggested that Ciela hire more guards. They could go together to the mercenary guild on the Central Street. Just as she was thinking it over, Helen came looking for her. Ciela had not returned for a long time, which had made Helen extremely anxious. She looked angrily at the man before her. So this was the man who lived by the lake and had been constantly trying to get close to Ciela. After Otesta took the initiative to greet Helen, Ciela brought Helen with her and said goodbye to him. Before leaving, she also thanked Otesta for lending her his handkerchief and promised to wash it clean and return it next time. Otesta looked forward to their next meeting even more. Speaking of which, when Ciela had talked with him, she had not felt uncomfortable. At first, she had indeed been wary of him, but as they spoke more, her guard had lowered a great deal. And while chatting, she had not felt awkward in the slightest, as if she had forgotten that being alone with a man would make her panic. Ciela herself did not know why she did not reject him. Helen thought it over carefully. He was indeed tall and handsome, and looked quite pleasing to the eye. As for his leg injury, it would probably heal after some time. Last time, when Nina treated him, she had seen that the muscles in his legs were well developed. Ciela knew nothing about this. The two returned to the house. Ciela told everyone that she had decided to hire servants. She wanted to repair the warehouse and the winery first, which meant they would need expert assistance. In addition, she wanted to replace the fence with one that was taller and sturdier. If Nina and Rena did not mind, she also wanted to add a few more guards. Neither of them objected. Ciela planned to contact Taylor. After some time, she would also need to go to the central bank. Helen stopped her on this matter, saying she could have Lanslow handle it. The entire room was filled with a warm atmosphere. Ciela was learning to interact with new people like an ordinary person, adapting to getting along with others. After all, she could not remain trapped in the pain of the past for the rest of her life, unable to free herself. She had also gained some courage to move toward a new life. The next day, Helen and Rena set out. Rena went out to hire people, while Helen went to see Lanslow. Only Ciela and Nina remained in the residence, and it welcomed a rare period of peace. But outside, the sky was gloomy. It felt as if it was going to rain, and the rain grew heavier and heavier. In her room, Ciela could not help but worry. At that moment, Nina knocked on the door and told her not to come out. No matter what noises she heard outside, she must not come out. A group of bastards had arrived, and there were quite a few of them. Although Nina did not know whether she could win alone, she promised that Ciela would not be harmed in the slightest. Ciela stood nervously by the window and saw the group of people slowly approaching. She wanted to help Nina, but she did not know how to fight at all. If she rushed out rashly, she might only cause trouble. Downstairs, Nina began a fierce battle against them, but she was still outnumbered. Kyle attacked Nina from behind and looked provocatively at Ciela. He had appeared, that disgusting man. He had poisoned Nina, and Nina collapsed into unconsciousness. The antidote was in Kyle's hands. He told Ciela that the choice was entirely hers. Ciela thought about how to resolve this. If she counterattacked now, she had no confidence she could escape. She could only go along with him for now and make him lower his guard. So she exchanged pleasantries with Kyle and asked how he had been all these years. Kyle told her that after all these years, he liked Ciela even more. He wanted to take Ciela away and live happily with her. Ciela felt furious. He actually called the days when he had tortured her beyond recognition happiness. She tightened her grip on the weapon hidden in her clothes. Looking at that face gradually drawing closer, killing intent rose in her heart. Ciela warned herself that she could not act rashly. Nina's antidote was still in his hands. She negotiated with Kyle, using herself as a bargaining chip in exchange for the antidote. Of course, Kyle was unwilling. He looked at Ciela with contempt. He reached his hand toward her hair. Ciela immediately knocked his hand away. This action completely enraged Kyle. He shouted at Ciela and threatened her with Nina. Ciela's patience had reached its limit. There was no time left to hesitate over every concern. She pulled the hidden dagger from her skirt and stabbed fiercely toward Kyle's neck. If she did not resist now, Ciela herself might lose her life. Kyle clutched his bleeding neck, his eyes filled with disbelief. The rain outside the window fell harder and harder. Meanwhile, on the other side, the lake began overflowing because of the storm. Otesta's house would also be flooded. Tristan urged him to leave quickly before it was submerged. But Otesta was not flustered at all. Either way, he would die. Dying like this did not feel too bad. He told Tristan to leave him. He had his own plan. Tristan looked at His Highness with worry. He knew His Highness did not truly think that way. The Crown Prince's enthronement ceremony should have been the most glorious day of his life, yet someone had set fire to his palace. On top of that, the second prince had used a scheme that left him lame in one leg. Tristan had rescued Otesta from that crisis. From then on, he had sent His Highness to a safe place and protected him all this time. But Otesta had almost no will to live. Although he had not tried to take his own life, he had long grown tired of the pressure of fighting for the throne, so when danger came, he did not resist. Tristan could not accept that. As long as His Highness could get through tonight safely, he would return to his usual self. His Highness did not truly want to die. He was only weary. Tristan carried a bucket outside. In order to break the curse on His Highness's leg and help him regain power, he had to do everything he could now to keep His Highness alive. Just as Tristan was preparing for the flood, he suddenly heard Ciella's scream. It made him freeze in place. There was some distance between the two houses, and with the pouring rain, sound should have had difficulty carrying over. Yet he had still heard a scream. It was simply absurd, but perhaps this was an opportunity to awaken His Highness's will to live. Tristan rushed into the house at once. He shoved the door open and told Otesta that something seemed to have happened at the winery below. Meanwhile, Kyle was not someone who could be dealt with easily. A mere minor wound did not affect him much. Holding a long sword, he approached Ciela step by step. Only by obtaining the antidote in his hand could she save Nina. Ciela could no longer retreat. However, that bastard Kyle was not afraid at all. He was a complete and utter scoundrel. Just as he raised his long sword and prepared to stab Ciela, she nervously closed her eyes, feeling that she was sure to die this time. Then she lost consciousness. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself in a room. It felt as though her entire body was screaming. At that moment, Helen rushed in and asked about Ciela's condition. Looking at her with concern, Helen told her she had been unconscious for 2 days. She also told Ciela that Otesta had saved her. Nina was fine too. Helen and the others had given Nina the antidote, and she had woken up immediately. Ciela was shocked. Otesta clearly lived by the lake, so how had he come to save her? Before, when he had said they should be neighbors who watched over and helped each other, Ciela had not felt much about it. But after truly being saved by him, Ciela felt she had to thank him properly. Helen told her to rest well. She would bring Nina to see Ciela. Ciela still had many questions, such as what had happened to Kyle, but she was far too exhausted. Just as she was about to fall asleep, there was another knock at the door. It was Otesta. He wanted to personally check whether Ciela was all right. After Helen brought him into the room, she went out. Otesta sat down like a gentleman, maintaining a certain distance from Ciela. This action dispelled Ciela's discomfort at being alone with an adult man. She thanked Otesta. If not for him, Ciela might not be here now. She wanted to repay Otesta and told him that if there was anything he wanted, he should tell her. Otesta told her that he had not saved her for a reward, so she did not need to be so polite. Besides, he had not caught the mastermind. Kyle had escaped. What should they do now? He would definitely come looking for her again. But Otesta told her that all the mercenaries Kyle brought had already been locked up. Ciela could think carefully about how to deal with them. Ciela recuperated for several days, but she still had no idea how to punish those mercenaries. She worried that Kyle would make a comeback, but she had spent a great deal of effort arranging this place with her own hands, and she truly did not want to move. Was she supposed to keep living in this endless flight forever? Just thinking about it made her despair. No, she could not live like that. Ciela would rather kill Kyle and go to prison herself than accept a life of hiding here and there. If she ran away again, she would still live in anxiety. That would be completely different from the new life she had imagined at the start. Ciela made up her mind and found Rena, telling her that she was going to interrogate the mercenaries Kyle had brought right now. Rena was startled by this sudden decision. Ciela knew she had to grow stronger quickly and learn to face fear and threats. Right now, she wanted to know Kyle's whereabouts with certainty rather than remain passive. She and Rena went down the stairs and saw Nina training alone in the garden. After what had happened, Nina had been blaming herself constantly, believing that Ciela had been put in danger because she was not strong enough. Ciela told her it had only been an accident, but Nina was still very upset. She promised Ciela that she would become stronger. After that incident, Nina had thrown herself into training, practicing swordsmanship day and night. Ciela also blamed herself, always feeling that Nina was suffering like this only because she had followed her. But looking at the sincere expression in Nina's eyes, Ciela could not bring herself to tell her to rest. Nina noticed them and came over, asking whether they were going somewhere. Rina told her that Ciela was going to personally interrogate those mercenaries. Nina was also shocked when she heard the news. She thought it was too dangerous and insisted on going with them. Ciela readily agreed. The three of them arrived at the entrance where the mercenaries were being held. Nina went ahead to scout, preventing Ciela from encountering danger. Fortunately, aside from a somewhat unpleasant smell inside, there was nothing abnormal. The three walked in. Tristan looked at them in surprise. He had not expected Ciela to come, and told her the scene here might be uncomfortable. Ciela had not expected Tristan to be here either. Rina told her that during this time, Tristan had been here guarding these mercenaries. Ciela still did not understand. He was clearly Otesta's bodyguard, so why had he stayed here the whole time? Tristan suddenly knelt and told her he was guarding this place voluntarily. Otesta had tried to stop him, saying it would burden Ciela, but Tristan had his own reason and insisted on staying here. Ciela was flustered by him and told him to get up quickly. Nina looked at the ridiculous scene between the two of them and laughed until tears came out. It was Rina who interrupted them and told them to hurry up and get to business. Meanwhile, on the other side of the continent, Ashit had never given up searching for Ciela. Finally, after his persistent efforts, he learned of Ciela's whereabouts and her current address. Just as he was preparing to set out personally for Ciela's current residence, Edwin stopped him. He angrily questioned him. If Ashit truly wanted to recover anything, why had he not cherished Ciela and treated her well when she had still been in the residence? Sister Ciela had finally obtained a happy life, and Edwin could not stand by and watch it be destroyed. Ashit only found it laughable. He felt Edwin did not know the inside story at all. In his eyes, the one who had unilaterally broken the contract left without a word, and put him in a difficult position with Ciela. Ignoring Edwin's attempt to stop him, he continued preparing to depart. Edwin was still arguing with Ashit, standing his ground. Dennis came out, grabbed Edwin, and tried to take him back to his room. When Edwin saw who it was, he flung him away and questioned why he was still in the residence, and why Ashit had not driven him out yet. Dennis loudly protested his innocence, saying that no matter how much Edwin hated him, he could not slander him. Edwin showed him no mercy and recounted everything from that day. A suspicious man had pushed him, nearly killing him, and Dennis had stood by and watched. Dennis desperately tried to argue, attempting to clear himself of blame. Everyone began discussing it, but Ashit spoke, saying that he had already questioned every servant in the residence, and no one had seen that suspicious man. Edwin retorted that the man must have fled in fear. The two began arguing. At that moment, Camilla walked down the stairs. She said she had clearly seen what happened that day. Dennis excitedly stepped forward, thinking she had come to support him. But Camilla passed him by directly. She told the Duke that everything Edwin said was true. She had thought the whole matter was an accident. Perhaps the butler had frozen in place because the incident happened so suddenly. Ashit asked in confusion why she was only saying it now. Camilla explained that she did not want to see Edwin suspected of lying. Ashit felt an extreme headache and immediately ordered Dennis to be expelled from the residence. Then he left without looking back. Afterward, Edwin found Camilla and asked why she had lied. That day, she had clearly been resting in her room the entire time. Camilla only told him that in life, sometimes a few lies were necessary. In the manor's warehouse, Tristan brought Ciela before the group of mercenaries. The mercenaries' faces were filled with fear. Ciela began the interrogation, warning them to answer truthfully. If they lied even once, she would not be polite. She asked which knight order the mercenaries belonged to. The mercenaries trembled as they answered that they were all wandering mercenaries who accepted work from anyone who paid. Unexpectedly, the very first question reached a dead end. But Rina discovered a flaw. These people were lying. The scars on the mercenaries' heads were actually hiding their previous marks. Tristan also pointed out that if that were true, then the scars carved into their faces meant these mercenaries were professional killers. Nina added that the mark beside the eyes meant this person had assassinated nobles, while the one on the forehead was proof of sexual assault. Ciela had thought these people had only been used by Kyle. She had not expected them all to be unforgivable criminals. Originally, she had planned to let them go as long as they provided information about Kyle. But now, it seemed there was no need. There was no need to interrogate these people anymore. Since things had come this far, Ciela needed to handle the matter in her own way. First, she had to strengthen the manor's security. She wrote a letter to Taylor, asking him to send more trustworthy mercenaries like Nina and Rena. Then, reluctantly, she wrote a letter to Leonard. She needed Leonard, as the head of the family, to expel Kyle from House Leroy. That way, Kyle would become a commoner, and if Ciela were threatened again, she could deal with him directly as a noble. After she finished writing the 2 letters, Helen came in with freshly brewed tea for Ciela to taste. These were tea leaves Otesta had specially brought over. Ciela froze. Helen also told her the news from Lancelot. The bank had agreed to let Ciela transfer her assets to the bank here. It would take about 4 days to complete. If she was going to cooperate with Leonard, she needed leverage in her hands. This money had arrived at exactly the right time. If he could see with his own eyes the partial inheritance rights to the White Jade Stone mine, he would probably agree gladly. Ciela asked Helen to send out both letters. A few days later, Helen came trembling to Ciela's door and told her there was a guest. Rena had no idea how he had found the place. He had even brought a large amount of jewelry in his carriage, along with gifts. Ciela stood up and told Helen he had come to bribe her. Between them, this was only a transaction. Helen was unhappy. After all, Leonard had been the one to take everything that belonged to Ciela. Ciela understood that in her heart, but now was not the time to tear all pretense apart. She went to the reception room and met Leonard, asking how he had found her, since she had not left an address in the letter. Leonard told her he had received a letter from his mother, Ciela's stepmother. She had probably heard what had happened to Kyle here. Ciela guessed Kyle must have fled back to her stepmother. Leonard also told her that her stepmother was furious now and wanted to hire people to kill her. But Leonard had spent even more money to make those people leave. But this was not a long-term solution. There was only so much Leonard could do. Ciela had to prepare in advance and protect herself. The reason her stepmother was acting like this was that her precious son had been nearly blinded by the prostitute she despised. Ciela only remembered injuring Kyle's neck. That must have happened after she lost consciousness. It was probably Otesta's doing. But now was not the time to think about that. She needed to focus on Kyle's whereabouts. Kyle was currently recovering in peace under her stepmother's protection. Meanwhile, her stepmother had embezzled a huge amount of family funds. Her stepmother's power was far too great. If it were only Kyle, he could still be dealt with. Ciela wanted Leonard to bring Kyle out. She was not in a hurry to kill him, but he had to be locked up first. Ciela truly did not want Kyle to ruin her life. She would rather spend more money if that was what it took. She had escaped in order to be happy. Ciela told Leonard to expel Kyle from the family. What had happened between them before could be wiped clean. At the same time, he could obtain partial mining rights to the White Jade Stone mine. This was an enormous benefit to Leonard, so he immediately began discussing with Ciela how to drive Kyle out of the family. This required Ciela's cooperation. In noble society, Kyle had always presented himself as a gentleman. Only when he met Ciela would he lose his reason. If they wanted him to commit a serious mistake, Ciela had to be present. Leonard suggested that Ciela personally host a ball. After that, Kyle would definitely make a move against Ciela on the day everyone came to attend. Leonard promised her that his wife could handle the ball. Ciela only needed to attend. He also promised that he would guarantee Ciela's safety. Ciela refused Leonard's gifts, but he left the carriage behind and departed at once. There were also many gowns inside, and Helen was delighted by this. Ciela understood with a sigh that those gowns had definitely been chosen by Leonard's wife, Sylvia. Leonard's father had originally been a groom for a certain baron. Sylvia was the only daughter of that household. When Leonard followed his father in and out of the stables, he met Sylvia. The two fell in love, but because Sylvia's parents opposed them, they broke up. Later, when his stepmother married into House Leroy with her 2 sons, the 2 of them were able to marry smoothly. At least in front of Sylvia, Leonard had always appeared to be a good husband. But when he faced Camilla, Leonard seemed to lose his soul. And it was not just him. Other people also displayed such strange behavior. Ciela had genuinely felt Sylvia's warmth before. With a wife like that, Leonard still got so close to Camilla. Ciela truly felt it was not worth it for him. In the end, she decided she still had to tell Sylvia about this. When everyone learned that Ciela was going to hold a ball, the most excited one was none other than Helen. Everyone was very happy at the thought that Ciela would look especially beautiful that day. Everyone busied themselves with decorating the manor and preparing for the ball. Ciela wanted to sit in the garden a little longer. Nina thoughtfully left her own cloak for her. Such relaxed and peaceful days truly made one feel at ease. Ciela sat alone in the garden. Otesta walked over from a distance. He had come to tell Ciela that the mercenaries from last time had already been handed over to the police station. After investigation, they were found to be criminals wanted across the entire empire. The police station had rewarded them with some bounty money. Otesta wanted to give all the money to Ciela. After all, the bounty had been earned because of Ciela's idea, so it should all go to her. Otesta was being rather stubborn. Besides, this had been achieved through the cooperation of both sides' loyal guards. A few days later, Ciela received the bounty money, but she had not expected there to be so much. She called Tristan over and told him she really could not accept all of it. She could only take half. Tristan hurriedly refused. They had clearly acted on their own and interfered in Ciela's affairs. So how could they accept money? Ciela told him that if he did not accept it, she would feel uneasy. In the end, Tristan still accepted it. Ciela went to stroll in the garden, leaving Tristan behind. Helen poured water for him and asked why Otesta had not come. Tristan explained that he had some private matters to handle recently, so he was very busy. Moreover, now that they had found a way to heal his legs, everyone probably would not be able to see him for a while. This matter still had to be kept secret. Although Helen wanted to tell Ciela the good news immediately, she still had to hold back. On the other side of the continent, the streets were noisy and crowded. Dennis hid in the shadows, observing everything around him. He felt extremely resentful. How had he fallen to such a state? He was supposed to inherit the old steward's position in the future and become the next head steward of the ducal residence. His future duchess also relied on him greatly. Why had things become like this? Even Camilla had advised him to leave obediently, and after leaving, not to act rashly unless she contacted him. And this time, it was Camilla who had arranged to meet him here. She told Dennis that thanks to him telling her the ducal residence had a back gate, she had been able to come out smoothly. But Dennis had no memory of ever saying that. There were too many eyes and ears here, so the two decided to talk somewhere else. They walked deeper and deeper into a secluded area. At last, they reached the end of an alley. Dennis asked urgently when he would be able to return to the ducal residence. After a long while, Camilla finally spoke coldly. He probably would never be able to return. Dennis was stunned in place. He asked her excitedly what she meant. She had clearly agreed before. Camilla placed her hand on his arm. Dennis only felt a chill closing in all around him. The next moment, his body could no longer move. Camilla rubbed her wrist and smiled as she told him he had worked hard during this period. At this point, she revealed her true face and told Dennis that the second prince was also very satisfied with his performance. The alley finally returned to silence. At Ciela's manor, Helen had returned from going out. She had gone to see her brother. Lancelot had confirmed that the vault had arrived at Jennet Bank. It would be much more convenient to use from now on. Ciela still decided to personally visit the bank after some time. Helen had also brought Taylor's reply to Ciela. Ciela checked it at once. Taylor had sent her the profile of a guard he was quite satisfied with for her to choose from. The two decided to call Nina and Rena over so they could choose their companion together. They would have a better eye when choosing a fellow guard. Now, the only thing to worry about was the ball in a few days. A few days later, a splendid carriage stopped in front of Ciela's manor. It was Sylvia. She had come especially to confirm some details of the ball with Ciela. After all, the two had not seen each other for a long time, so they greeted each other awkwardly. Sylvia looked at Ciela with eyes full of heartache. She had heard Ciela had been driven out of the Count's residence. Her days must have been very difficult. Sylvia truly wanted to help her. Ciela did not notice her gaze. She asked Sylvia indirectly whether there had been any changes in her recent life. Sylvia lowered her head and smiled. She placed her hand on her lower abdomen and told Ciela that she was pregnant. This was a thunderbolt from a clear sky. But Leonard and Camilla had that ambiguous relationship. Ciela clenched her fists. She had originally intended to tell Sylvia this time about Leonard's conduct. But in this situation, she truly could not bring herself to speak. Sylvia looked so happy right now that Ciela really did not want to shatter it. But if she kept silent, would that not make her Leonard's accomplice? That would be unfair to Sylvia. Seeing that she had been silent for a long time, Sylvia asked what was wrong. Ciela explained that she was just too surprised. She really could not bear to tell Sylvia at this moment. Just then, Leonard walked in, praising the scenery near Ciela's manor and asking Sylvia to go outside for a walk. Just like that, only he and Ciela remained in the room. He sat down directly and told Ciela that Kyle might make a move at any time. The ball needed to be held as soon as possible. Sylvia had also agreed. This time, she would be the host of the ball. This ball was being prepared in order to capture Kyle. Sylvia wanted to create a surprise and had not yet told Leonard about her pregnancy. She also did not know the purpose of the ball. If they followed this plan, Sylvia and the child could both be in danger. If they told Sylvia the entire plan, she would indeed be mentally prepared. But once she knew everything, she would probably stop the ball from being held. Ciela worried over what she should do. Leonard thought she was thinking about Kyle and told her Kyle had been busy recovering recently and had no mind to care about anything else. If it was about the ball, she did not need to worry. Sylvia would arrange everything. She was very happy to do these things. Ciela looked at him coldly and warned him not to let Sylvia down. That night, the two stayed at Ciela's manor. Sylvia came to chat with Ciela and told her the ball would be held at a nearby villa. The scenery there was very nice, and the villa was extremely spacious, making it very suitable for balls and other events. Also, Sylvia's younger brother lived there. The two chatted happily until very late. Early the next morning, Ciela woke up. Unexpectedly, she found Rena in the garden, seeming to be working on something. Rena blushed as she said it was a wooden table and chair set. Rena had made it herself. She was giving it to Ciela as a gift for the ball. Helen had said that receiving gifts for a ball was very important for noble ladies. So Rena remembered how happy Ciela had been when they had eaten outside before. With a set of tables and chairs like this, they could sit here comfortably to eat or drink tea. Ciela shed moved tears. Meanwhile, at the Nocton ducal residence, Edwin was keeping watch by Camilla's bedside. For some unknown reason, Camilla had fainted again. The residence doctor had already come to examine her, but had found no problem. Fortunately, it was not long before she woke up. Ashit also rushed over after hearing the news. He saw Camilla stand up and asked how her body was. Camilla said she was fine. Her hand slowly reached toward Ashit. Edwin witnessed all of this, but Camilla stopped. She asked Edwin if he could step out for a moment, saying she wanted to speak with Ashit alone. Ever since Edwin's argument with the Duke last time, he did not want to interact with him too much, so he strode away. After the Duke drove Dennis away, he began busily investigating the other traitors in the mansion, so he had thrown Sister Ciela to the back of his mind. Edwin secretly swore that he absolutely would not become a bad man like that. At the manor, Ciela was packing her luggage to go to the villa for the ball. She was thinking about whether she had forgotten anything. Suddenly, she remembered her short sword. After the incident with Kyle, the short sword had disappeared. That handy weapon had given her a great sense of security. Holding the short sword Nina had made her feel filled with courage to face difficulties. It seemed she would have to search properly for it or buy a new one. At dinner time, everyone was waiting for Nina. She had said she would return before dinner. They saw her run back, breathlessly, holding something in her hand. She handed the bag to Ciela and told her to open it herself. Ciela froze when she saw what was inside. It was a short sword and a chain. Nina smiled and told her that she had said before that once they arrived in Genid, she would replace Ciela's short sword with a better one. This was her gift. Ciela held the short sword and felt a warmth she had never possessed before. Nina smiled and told Ciela that she had been worrying all along about what Ciela lacked, and then remembered that her short sword had been lost. So she bought one. It was much better than the previous short sword. As for the chain, Nina had noticed that Ciela had been worrying about where to put the key to the vault. So she thought it would be convenient to hang the key on it and wear it around her neck. She even promised to buy Ciela a gold one after she made a lot of money. Ciela was immersed in this gentleness. She thanked Nina. She was truly very happy. This scene also stirred Helen's competitive spirit. She shouted that she would prepare an even more impressive gift. Ciela, who had been moved, was amused by her. The days that had once been spent trembling with unease were now so joyful. This made her begin to look forward to the arrival of her debut ball. Late that night, on the other side of the woods, Tristan was interrogating an assassin. Bianca Leroy, Ciela's stepmother, had sent several assassins to kill Lady Ciela. All this time, Otesta and Tristan had been dealing with these assassins in secret. But this was the first time they had encountered such a powerful one. There might be something strange about it. Tristan planned to examine him carefully. He pinched the assassin's chin and saw the mark on his tongue. It was the same as the curse pattern on His Highness's legs. He immediately reported the matter. It seemed the imperial family had also interfered in this matter. The second prince had probably discovered Ciella's current residence as well. Fortunately, Ciella was going to attend her debut ball and leave the manor for a while. There was still time to prepare and deal with them. Early the next morning, before Ciella had woken up, the clatter outside woke her. She got up and went to the window to look. It was actually Otesta. The two sat down at the long table in the garden. Otesta told her he had heard Ciella would be leaving for a while, so he had come specially to say goodbye. Ciella did not understand why he had that expression. After considering it, she asked if she could send him an invitation. She had heard that Villa also had a lake. It would be nice if he and Tristan could come and have fun. She would treat it as thanks for everything they had done during this time. Otesta looked at her with a smile. He thanked her for the invitation, but said they probably could not go. Ciella asked him why. Otesta explained that he had also prepared a gift, but it was not ready yet. That evening, in Otesta's residence, he was doing rehabilitation training for his legs. He could already feel a little sensation now. This was a method a curse practitioner had thought of. Mages possessed powerful curse energy, and the Empire had feared them for a long time, so it had always wanted to erase the existence of this group. But many mages had survived in secret. One of them was Camilla, Cassius's trusted subordinate, and the former made a princess Isolde. She had cursed Isolde to death, and she was also responsible for the curse on Otesta's legs. He had sought out a curse practitioner for revenge. Now it seemed that perhaps he could also deal with Camilla. As long as his legs recovered quickly, he would be able to personally attend the ball. Meanwhile, at the Nocton ducal residence, Ashit also learned of Kyle's movements. The state Kyle had shown was already pathological. Moreover, Second Prince Cassius had been sending letters frequently, urging him to hand over Ciella. Ciella had no idea how dangerous her situation was. He could not leave it alone. Ashit told his servants that he was going to Genet. A few days later, Ciella and her party arrived at the Aubert Villa. Bliss received them. He was Sylvia's younger brother. Ciella greeted him. Bliss told her that his sister and Leonard had gone out, so he would take Ciella to her room. Ciella still felt some fear toward unfamiliar men. She knew Bliss had no ill intentions, and she only had to calm down, but she still could not reach out her hand. Bliss must have found it strange. Bliss realized something and explained that he had been rude, not noticing that Ciella was not wearing gloves. Bliss asked if it was all right for him to lead the way in front. Ciella was grateful for Bliss's thoughtfulness and followed him to the prepared room. Nina and Rena were tidying things in the room. Ciella sat by the window in a daze, still shaken by what had just happened. Nina and Rena noticed she was unhappy and decided to take her outside for a walk. Ciella gladly agreed. At dinner that day, Sylvia was shocked when she learned that Bliss had personally received Ciella. She nervously asked whether Ciella had been targeted. Ciella quickly said no, and that she had been the one who had been somewhat rude. After Leonard heard what had happened, he told Ciella not to blame herself and to simply prepare for the ball with peace of mind. In the following days, Ciella and Sylvia both prepared for the ball. A servant came to report that the banquet planner had brought flowers and needed Sylvia to confirm them. Sylvia told Ciella that she could go alone. Ciella stayed behind to handle the final work on the invitations. After Sylvia left, Ciella picked up her pen and hesitated. Although Otesta had already refused, she still wanted to send him an invitation just in case. But she also worried that receiving it would put pressure on him. She could not understand herself either, so she decided to go out for some air. She came alone to the pond in the courtyard. As expected, her mood instantly calmed. Just as she was enjoying her time alone, a sound suddenly came from behind her. It was Bliss. It turned out someone was already there. He did not want to disturb Ciella and turned to leave, but Ciella stopped him. She wanted to take this chance to clear things up with Bliss. Ciella confessed to him that what happened earlier had been her problem. Bliss explained that he had actually been happy that Ciella had not reached out her hand because he had mysophobia, so she truly did not need to apologize. This was the first time Ciella had met someone like herself. Perhaps she would get along well with him. Seeing that Ciella was not very resistant, Bliss decided not to avoid her. He needed a quiet environment to read, and so the two of them enjoyed their own solitary time in the garden. The peaceful time did not last long before a servant hurried over to warn Bliss that a guest had arrived. At this time, Sylvia and the Count had also gone out with a banquet planner, and the uninvited guest was her stepmother, Bianca. When Ciela saw who had come, she froze in place. If that was the case, had Kyle come too? Then what about her plan? Her stepmother's terrifying face slowly enlarged in her mind. Ciela brought her stepmother back to the room and decided to strike first, questioning Bianca on whether she had hired killers to assassinate her. Hearing this, Bianca froze. The teacup in her hand fell to the floor. But when she opened her mouth, she blamed Ciela, saying Ciela should not say such strange things, and it scared her so much that she dropped her cup. This was Bianca's usual method. Whenever anything bad happened, she would shove the blame onto Ciela and make her feel sorry. Ciela no longer fell for it. She directly told Bianca to compensate her. She would never again be wrongfully blamed. The Ciela of today had grown up, and she had no interest in playing along with Bianca's act anymore. Bianca, whose sore spot had been struck, rose angrily and scolded Ciela for having no manners. Ciela cut her off directly and continued questioning her, asking whether Kyle had come too. Had Bianca not chased her all the way here because she wanted to hold Ciela accountable for Kyle's injury? Bianca stopped pretending as well and shouted, asking how Ciela could stab her own brother. Before she could finish, Ciela cut her off directly. She had acted in self-defense. Why did Bianca not ask her dear son what he had been trying to do? Seeing that she could not out-argue Ciela, Bianca flew into a rage and grabbed a teacup from the table, hurling it towards Ciela. At the crucial moment, Leonard returned, stopping his mother and telling her not to torment Ciela anymore. Bianca had not expected even her own son to defy her. The next second, Leonard received a solid slap. Bianca questioned whether he had gone around spreading word that she wanted to kill Ciela. Then she turned around and smiled warmly, trying to get close to Ciela. Her face changed faster than flipping a page. Before Ciela could react, Bianca began speaking endlessly. She had heard Ciela and Duke Nocton had fallen out, and that Keterland was interested in marrying her again. Ciela unconsciously clenched her teeth. No wonder Bianca had come this time looking like a weasel paying a visit to the hen house. It turned out she wanted to sell Ciela off again. Ciela shoved her stepmother away. She warned her never to appear before her again, then ordered the servants to see her out. Bianca shouted loudly, but Leonard and Ciela left without even looking back. The two returned to the room. Leonard told her that ever since Ciela left, Bianca had begun tormenting Sylvia. And today, Ciela had secretly told the steward to have Sylvia avoid her. Leonard thanked Ciela awkwardly. At this point, Ciela had nothing more to say. Next, she only needed to prepare properly for the ball. She had to make Kyle fall into the trap she had carefully laid. At the docks, a steamship slowly came ashore. Ashet had arrived in Genet. He hurriedly set out for Ciela's residence, but his subordinate told him Ciela was not here now. Count Leroy had visited Lady Ciela several times, and after that, the lady had left Genet together with Count Leroy. His men had sent messages to Ashet, and now they had already sent others to follow them. Ashet asked in frustration when Ciela had left. His subordinate told him she had left half a month ago. During this time, they had already sent 3 people to deliver letters to the Duke. Had he not received any of them? But Ashet had not even seen the messenger's shadows. Then where exactly had the messengers gone? Meanwhile, at the ducal residence, light rain was falling outside. Camilla stood alone by the window. At this time, Ashet returned. Camilla greeted him while taking off her gloves. Then, as usual, she held Ashet's hand. Ashet lowered his gaze and looked at Camilla's gloves. He could not help thinking of Ciela, who had not even had a decent pair of gloves. Just as dizziness was about to completely occupy his mind, he flung Camilla's hand away. He only said he had something to do and had to go out. Camilla watched Ashet's departing back. Her curse had actually failed. Soon, the day of the debut ball arrived. Ciela changed into the prepared gown. It was extremely gorgeous. Sylvia sighed that the gown suited her perfectly. Just then, Bliss also arrived. He had specially prepared a gift for Ciela. It was a pair of gloves. At today's ball, she would definitely meet many people, and greetings with them would be unavoidable. Ciela happily put on the gloves and was very grateful for Bliss's gift. Sylvia also took out the gift she had prepared. Today was actually a masquerade ball, and she had prepared masks for the guests as well. Ciela marveled at how thoughtful Sylvia was. Wearing a mask set with diamonds, Ciela would surely shine throughout the entire venue. Soon, evening arrived. Many guests came to the villa. Ciela and her party stood in the corridor. Just then, Helen ran over. She hugged Ciela at once. The two had not seen each other for a long time. Helen told her, that when she arrived at the villa, she had met someone. That person said he wanted to see Ciela and had been waiting since earlier. At this moment, Nina and Rena had to go patrol and see whether there were any suspicious people. Unexpectedly, Helen also wanted to go with them. In the blink of an eye, only Ciela was left alone. The sound of footsteps behind her made her turn around involuntarily. The person who came was Otesta. Ciela was pleasantly surprised. She had thought he would not come. She was astonished to discover that Otesta was not using a cane. Otesta smiled and told her that this treatment had been very effective. He looked at Ciela's empty neck and asked why she was not wearing the key necklace today. Ciela explained that there were many people outside and she was afraid of losing the key, so she had put it away. Otesta said that was perfect. Then he took out a box. He said he thought this necklace would definitely suit her and asked whether she liked it. Ciela looked at the white jadestone necklace before her and froze in place. Otesta handed the necklace to her. He personally put the necklace on Ciela. It truly suited Ciela very well. At this moment, Leonard came over. It was almost time for Ciela to enter. Otesta said goodbye to the two of them and said they would meet again at the ball. The two came to the garden. Leonard told her he had already given instructions. Even if Kyle did not have an invitation, they would let him in. Ciela was still worried about whether Kyle would actually come. At that moment, in the flower bushes, Kyle was hiding in the dark and looking for an opportunity. With a roar, Kyle leapt out of the bushes, gripping a dagger as he stabbed toward the two of them. Leonard was immediately knocked to the ground. In the emergency, Ciela grabbed Kyle's hand. Leonard also reacted, pushing Kyle down, shielding Ciela behind him, and telling her to quickly call people over. Kyle could not help sneering. He told them the mercenaries he had brought had already killed all the guards here and had even injured Leonard along the way. Now it was too late for Ciela to find anyone. She had to think of another way. Ciela looked toward the bridge in the distance. She remembered Bliss telling her not to get too close to the railing on the bridge. This lake was quite deep. Now, it seemed she could only try it. Ciela provoked Kyle, who was preparing to make a fatal move. He looked back and saw Ciela standing on the railing of the bridge. Ciela told him to let Leonard go. Kyle laughed dismissively. He did not believe Ciela would dare to jump. Although Ciela's life was full of wounds, she had never thought of seeking death. But now, there was no other way. Ciela leapt forward and quickly fell into the lake. The gown soaked by the water became heavy, making her sink rapidly. Just before she lost consciousness, a black-haired man also jumped into the lake. Was it Kyle? Even if she died here, Ciela would not beg him to save her. The black-haired man held Ciela. The one who had come was Otesta. He carried the unconscious Ciela back to shore. On the other side, Kyle had already been restrained by the people Otesta brought. But Kyle did not know the identity of the newcomer and mocked him without restraint. Otesta could not help sneering. He told his subordinates to let Kyle go and take Ciela to a doctor first. He would deal with Kyle himself. Tristan took Ciela away. Kyle stood up arrogantly. Otesta threw him a long sword. Otesta said, "Didn't you want to kill me just now? Then come at me." His disdainful tone and contemptuous gaze completely enraged Kyle. Kyle immediately drew the long sword and stabbed toward Otesta. When Ciela opened her eyes again, she discovered she was lying in bed. Helen was watching over her at the side, and when she saw Ciela wake, she asked joyfully how Ciela felt. Helen had also learned that Otesta was the crown prince. Moreover, she had also learned why Ciela had held this ball. When Sylvia was scolding Leonard, she had already revealed the whole matter. And because Kyle had attempted to murder an Imperial family member, he had been escorted to the central prison. This time, he had attacked an Imperial family member. Even his noble status could not protect him now. In the coming trial, he would likely be sentenced to death. Ciela listened blankly to all of this. The reason Kyle would be sentenced so severely was because His Highness the Prince had revealed his identity. But the culprit from the previous assassination attempt on the Crown Prince had still not been arrested. Revealing his identity now would put him in danger. Ciela could not help worrying about Otesta. Just then, Sylvia heard Ciela had woken and hurriedly brought Leonard to see her. She blamed herself, saying it was all because she had insisted on holding a masquerade ball for Ciela that Ciela had gotten hurt. Leonard quickly comforted her, and he also learned that Sylvia was pregnant. The two became even closer. Sylvia looked at Ciela with heartache. Ciela must have had such a hard time during this period, bearing everything alone. Ciela had just been about to say she was fine. But Kyle's terrifying figure kept flashing through her mind. The suffering and fear she had experienced before tormented her in a very real way. In order to survive, she had chosen to become numb and lifeless, ignoring her own feelings. But she wanted to change. She honestly told everyone that she wanted to get better. Sylvia told her everything would get better. A few days later, in the garden, Ciela called Nina over and asked about the progress of matters. Only then did Ciela learn that Otesta had rescued her from the lake, and he had already returned to the palace now. After all, his leg injury had healed, so he no longer needed to hide his identity in the future. Nina also told her that Tristan was a marquis and that he had even sent guards over. From now on, they could feel at ease. Her stepmother Bianca and Ashit would no longer be able to come and disturb them. During this time, Ashit had come every day as if he had something to say. Speak of the devil. And he appeared. Noisy commotion came from outside the villa. It seemed a guest had arrived. Ciela decided to meet him in person and see what important matter he had. Ashit, standing at the entrance, saw Ciela walking toward him. He hurriedly stepped forward to show concern for her, asking whether it was true she had jumped into the lake. Had she truly wanted to kill herself? At the time, Ciela had indeed jumped with the determination to die, but she spoke coldly, saying it had only been an accident. She had not wanted to die at all. Without waiting for Ashit to react, Ciela asked why he had come here. Ashit looked at the cold Ciela. For a moment, he could not say anything. Ciela had no patience to keep standing there with him, so she immediately ordered him to leave. Ashit said anxiously that he had only wanted to resolve the misunderstanding between them and have Ciela return, which was why he had come to find her. Everything that had happened to the residents before, he summarized merely as a misunderstanding. Ciela truly could not endure it anymore. She loudly told him that if he had kept his promise at all, she would never have left. Ciela extended her hand. This was the mark left from what had happened before. Ashit was struck as if by lightning. Ciela no longer paid him any attention. She withdrew her hand and left without looking back. No matter how Ashit tried to stop her, Ciela ignored him. A few days later, Tristan came to Ciela. For certain reasons, he hoped she could appear in court as a witness. If merely testifying could make Kyle disappear from her life, she would be more than willing. Tristan would also protect her well. Ciela told Sylvia the news. She was very happy. After all, the imperial capital was the city where she had once lived. They were all full of anticipation for life in the imperial capital. Meanwhile, Camilla also made a move. Thunder rumbled outside, and rain poured down. The entire castle was shrouded in a heavy curtain of rain. Ashit walked back alone through the rain. Camilla held an umbrella and looked at him in disbelief. Ashit could not understand it. He had already bought an apartment on an island in a distant country. As long as they waited a few more years, Ciela could leave with him. Everything would be over. From then on, the two of them would live a happy life. Why could she not endure even these few years and had left directly? He returned to the residence. A servant told him that there seemed to be some connection between the second prince and Bianca. It also seemed that the one who had helped Kyle escape that island at the beginning was the second prince. Even this debut ball incident was very likely orchestrated by the second prince behind the scenes. Because the second prince kept supporting him, Kyle had been able to keep pestering Ciela. He had also strongly demanded that Ciela attend this trial. His purpose was to kill Ciela. Could it be that this time, he wanted to use Kyle's matter to get rid of Ciela? Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, moonlight fell over Otesta's residence. Ciela and her party had already arrived. The servants welcomed them warmly. The servants she had met before had all been rude, so she subconsciously began to guard against them. But they had no malice at all, and Ciela felt very comfortable. The servant Lumen told her that His Highness wished to see her, though he might take a while to arrive. But if she was tired, she could go rest directly. His Highness had also said that he would do his best not to make her wait too long. Ciela had long since become accustomed to waiting, so there were people who treasured her time and feelings. It was an unfamiliar and strange feeling, but this time she was willing to wait. Before long, hurried footsteps sounded. It was Otesta. He had been running around outside the entire day and was covered in sweat, so after washing up, he hurried over. Ciela looked at him. At a glance, she noticed the wound on his neck. That must have been the injury he received while dealing with Kyle. The two sat facing each other, neither knowing how to begin. Ciela thanked him first. She also apologized to him for having hidden her identity before. Otesta did not mind at all. After all, he had hidden his true identity as well. On the day of the succession ceremony, a fire broke out, and he fled straight from the palace. From then on, he had lived under an assumed name. The two introduced themselves to each other again. They were now formally acquainted. Otesta had also brought some good news. Although the second prince had stepped in to interfere with this trial, they had made preparations as well. Otesta had found a witness who could provide decisive testimony.